blah, blah, blah. It was that kind of stuff.
But I think that when Green Day or Green Gay, whatever their name is, that page that does the video essays on Drag Race stuff.
I don't know that. I never even heard of this person. Green Gay?
I think it's either Green Day or Green Gay. But they do video essays about Drag Race girls. You've probably seen one without realizing you've seen one. And it's more than likely in your recommended YouTube videos if you're, anyway.
That was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
This is a picture of Bob the Drag Queen meeting RuPaul in 2010 during a book signing in New York City. Little did either of them know that their paths would cross again in the future, only with Bob being handpicked by Ru to be part of her legacy as the 8th main season winner of the franchise. Welcome everyone. The topic for today's episode is none other than Bob the Drag Queen. I've wanted to cover this queen for a while now, so what better time to do it than when Bob is in the middle of touring with Madonna. But before we start, this video is sponsored by manscaped.com. Do you smell that must in your balls? It might be because of that jungle that's growing between your legs. But don't worry, because Manscaped is now offering a solution to all your hair trimming needs. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is here to help you make sure that your body can look styled to perfection. This package is an all-inclusive kit that has everything you need to feel clean and confident, such as the lawnmower electric trimmer that honestly is so precise in the shape that it gives you. What the cool part is that regardless of what gender you identify with, you can benefit from this product. You can use it to trim your leg hair, that armpit hair, and honestly, even places in your body that you've never even bothered to look at before. Oh wait, you forgot to pay the light bill at your house? Well, don't worry, because the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra also has a built-in LED light to shine on the runway that is the skin on your body. But it doesn't stop there. The package comes with so many other products, like my personal favorite, the Crop Soother and the Crop Preserver. These are perfect for those of you that want to have fresh smelling balls. Manscaped's performance package includes 2 free gifts, like these boxers that I've been told make me look so tasty, as well as the jewel pouches shed where you can keep all your different manscaping products organized. Get the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra for 20% off plus international free shipping with the promo code on the screen and by clicking the link in the description. Now let's begin. We've all heard the term from rags to riches, which is used to describe any situation where someone goes from struggling in poverty to achieving a significant amount of wealth in their lives, in some cases also gaining fame and a highly regarded status among society. That's something that encapsulates the story of Bob the Drag Queen. Nowadays, there's a lot of varying perspectives that the fans have towards Bob. If you're watching this, you could be someone that's followed Bob since season 8 first aired back in 2016, or you're a newer fan that never actually watched season 8 but ended up learning about Bob through the Pit Stop or her podcast Sibling Rivalry. Regardless of which of those people you are, comment below what your first impression of Bob was. For me, I remember when I first learned about her drag name, I thought it was such a campy term to attribute to your drag character, which was sort of the point of it since it allowed her to stand out from many of the other queens in the scene. I know that when you look at Bob now, there's such a level of polish that she has in regards to the way she handles her career, or even just the evolution of her drag style in itself. It gives off the impression that she must have been part of the drag scene way before Drag Race even became a thing. Yet Bob was actually part of the generation of queens that was inspired to start drag by the very first season of RuPaul's Drag Race. Specifically, Bob attributes Bibi Zahara Benet as having captivated her when she'd walk down the runways, instilling a seed within Bob to want to seek out that same type of artistry within herself. When Bob first started off doing drag, it was around the same time that Thorgy Thor was working on her own drag career within the New York City drag scene. I mean, imagine it. It's early 2010. Everyone thinks the world is gonna end in 2 years because of the Mayan calendar ending. If anything, it was the perfect time to start getting into drag. At this point, Bob's name wasn't what we know it to be now. Instead, she went by the name Kittenwithawhip, which is a really bold name to give yourself. It's in the summer of 2009 that Kittenwithawhip would serve as a catalyst that gave Bob the space to hone in on her abilities as an entertainer.
Of my family, I've definitely always been the entertainer. I'm the one who was singing at the cookouts, dancing in the driveway, lip syncing to everything. I knew every Disney track before they even hit the theaters. I've always been an entertainer in my family. It was my role.
It takes a lot of time for a queen to evolve their drag style for the better. After all, when you're performing in front of random audiences every single night, you end up finding out things like which jokes the audience laughs at, how to deal with random drunks that invade your stage, or even just the idea of being comfortable enough to be present in the moment and bounce off of the audience interactions with you. In that sense, Bob was like the life of the party, and through word of mouth, many within the drag scene were noticing her as someone that was particularly good on the mic by always getting the audience to laugh. Which brings us to the season 8 promo release, which happened in early 2016. I remember in the year leading up to the reveal, there was already heavy rumors about Bob the drag queen being part of the cast. Yet there wasn't any spoilers about her placement, even though it was clear that she was definitely going to be one of the frontrunners for the season. I will say that when she did her whole entrance look, it took me a couple months before I found out that her jumpsuit spelled C-U-N-T. But then again, she did point out in her confessional that it was spelled right on her. For season 8, there was 3 New York City girls, which was Bob the drag queen, Acid Betty, and Thorgy Thor. Prior to RuPaul's Drag Race, every queen that had been from New York City weren't all that well known. I mean, yeah, we had people like Mimi on first, but even she wasn't exactly held to a high standard. In reality, it's when Bianca Del Rio won that was one of the first times that the New York City drag scene was really proud that one of their queens had gotten the crown. It was also a similar turnaround by the time Bob had gotten on Drag Race, because pretty much anyone that was a part of the New York City gay nightlife would have seen one of her shows at some point. That being said, while Bob wasn't necessarily the closest with Acid prior to filming, there was still a sort of camaraderie between a fellow New York queen being on the cast. On the other hand, Bob thought that she and Thorgy had already established a pretty decent friendship in the years leading up to season 8. Yet it wouldn't be until the season started airing and Bob saw all the confessionals of Thorgy talking about how annoying Bob is that she realized Thorgy didn't have the same carefree outlook on the competition that Bob had towards her. Nevertheless, it's that frenemies type of rivalry that would form the base of one of the main storylines for the season, which was Thorgy Thor coming close but always being outbested by Bob the drag queen, at least when it came to what the judges thought. When it came down to the competition, Bob placed safe for the first 2 episodes of season 8 that consisted of a design challenge and the Rusical where we got this amazing look from her. Yet it's really in episode 3 that she'd begin to shine in the competition through the first acting challenge. What made her performance here so memorable wasn't just that she was doing a good job with the role she received, it was also the improv that she had done within the scene too. However, even though this was a highly impressive moment within the acting challenge, it wouldn't go on to translate the same on the runway. This robot outfit has gone down in history as one of the most questionable choices that a queen has made. Granted, Bob did have a completely different thing planned out for the runway theme, but changed her mind last minute. Although it wasn't just the outfit that was bad, it was also the makeup quality that was starting to begin to get a little noticeable. Although that's something that we'll get to later on. At one point in the season, there's an infamous moment where Michelle Visage called Bob's drag ratchet, even saying at one point that she thinks Bob's whole drag persona is to always have something ratchet on. The term ratchet is considered to be a little problematic because it's a term used to describe someone's aesthetic as sort of cheap or really tacky, which made some people feel like it was a bit of a microaggression. Plus, it was Michelle using the word ratchet that eventually led to Derek Barry using that term against Bob too. But then again, it was a whole 7 years ago, so there's not much we can do about it now. Yet it's interesting to see the way the judges would slowly stop using certain words to describe people's drag as they began to build awareness around the impacts of their critique. By episode 4, the 9 remaining queens were split into 3 teams, with the New York City queens all forming their own group. You know, I know that while the winner of the episode would go on to be Robbie Turner, with the judges finding the group to be the best out of the 3, I really think that the challenge win should have gone to Bob's team, mostly because everything about it felt super polished, including the choreography and outfits that they styled for it. Throughout the course of the season, Bob would go on to win a total of 3 challenges. The acting challenge, Snatch Game, where she made her story by doing 2 different characters, and the Shady Politics episode where she was was paired with Derek Barry to make slandering commercials about each other. Naturally, Bob had the best track record of the season, because while Kimchi never landed in the bottom 2, she would only go on to win 2 challenges, which is why during the top 4 episode, when Rue asks each of the queens why they think they should be given the crown, Bob says that along with what she represents at a personal level, it's also just the fact that she performed the best out of the season track record wise. So naturally, the person who's done the best should get the crown. It was also difficult to deny that the times that Bob shined the most would be because she actually delivered far beyond people's expectations. The one time that Bob landed in the bottom 2 was at the top 5's book ball challenge, which actually wasn't that bad of an outfit. Yet the judges would critique her for not using enough of the papers and relying too much on the cover of the books. But I'm glad that they did place her in the bottom, because the season would not have been the same had we not gotten a proper lip sync for your life moment from Bob the Drag Queen. And what better way to do it than sending Derek Barry home, who was essentially her friendly rival in the season. When we get to the season 8 finale, it was the second finale in a row that had adopted the format for having each of the queen in the top 3 have a song created for them that would showcase their best abilities as a performer, as well as offer commentary on each of the queens' run throughout the episodes. I know that at this point, we know that Bob has always had such a high degree of confidence, so she probably already thought she had gotten the crown, which she sort of did, but to an extent. Bob said that during the season 8 finale, the crowd was extremely loud for Kimchi, so much so that she really felt threatened by Kim, to the point where she fully thought there was a chance that she might actually lose the crown. Eventually though, she did get announced as the winner, and we got to see her tearfully react to the moment. Bob winning season 8 was entirely deserved, yet it was also something that was very predictable to fans that had watched every season, since of the finalists, the person with the best track record would always go on to get the crown. I feel like something that many people don't talk about, or maybe just haven't heard of, since many of the fans that watched the show weren't around for a lot of the older seasons, but when Bob won season 8 in June of 2016, just a couple weeks later, the Pulse nightclub shooting would take place. This was a terrorist attack where an individual purposely went on a rampage in a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida, killing a total of 49 people, as well as dozens of people injured and traumatized. It was quite the shocking news story, and it happened just a year after gay marriage had been made legal across all 50 states. It was a reminder to many that the fight for equal rights is never over. What's worse is that people were so shook by the incident that many didn't even want to go out in the cities to celebrate Pride Month. But Bob the Drag Queen would go on to make a statement with, quote, "If we hide, they win," urging people to be louder and prouder than ever before.
Listen, celebrate Pride. Do not let something scare you, because if you don't go out, they fucking won, all right? And I'm not interested in letting nobody win.
It's during the Pulse nightclub shooting that we got stories such as Kenya Michaels from season 4 being in the club at the time that it happened, or Cynthia Lee Fontaine, who revealed on season 9 that she was actually supposed to perform there that night but canceled last minute, resulting in one of her friends showing up to the club expecting to see her but deciding to stay anyway to have some fun dancing. I think this is why it's so important that at a time where people were really scared of the potential hate crimes that were going to start happening, it was significant to have public figures like Bob the Drag Queen, who many attributed with the title of Queen of the People, just because of how involved she was with relaying the message of hope within the community. What's more is that she actually made a really good point, which was that the safe spaces that queer people have made with gay bars allows for people to be able to freely express themselves without the judgment of hateful bigots, which is why when it comes to activism, it's important for people to remember that the term doesn't always have to be for those that are actively attending protests. Sometimes the very act of living without fear and heading to dance at a gay bar in the midst of such tragedy is a form of activism in itself. Bob's always had strong ties to activism, which has been a key theme on how she's navigated her life from the moment she even became aware of social issues. It was even briefly mentioned on Drag Race when they showed this picture of Bob in 2010 getting arrested in Times Square for protesting protesting in support of marriage equality in the United States. It's experiences like that which created a backbone that she could rely on by the time she started to gain a fan base around herself. In a way, the way Bob navigated her newfound platform as a winner in those early weeks was very significant from what we'd come to expect from her in the years to come. Now, something that's sort of a really obscure story was the whole confusion around who was the reigning queen of 2016. This was because 2016 was the second year ever since 2012 where there was 2 seasons of Drag Race that aired. Bob was crowned in June of that year, but by the end of August, All Stars 2 had started airing. To make things worse, the promo for All Stars 2 began just about a week after season 8 aired its finale, so it was like there was no room for us to truly celebrate the newly crowned queen. But anyways, in October, Alaska was crowned the winner of All Stars 2 and the second inductee into the Hall of Fame. This made it so that some fans would begin to call Alaska the current reigning queen of the year, with some questioning if Bob's reign was only 3 months. It's funny that there tended to be some confusion around this topic because people were so perplexed by the idea of having 2 winners within 1 year, each with their own reign. Subsequently, this whole debate made Bob brand the phrase of the current effing reigning, a phrase to make it clear that it wasn't a debate at all and that she wasn't about to have her reign be questioned. Speaking of which, I feel like Bob's reign as a Rue girl was a slow burner. Don't get me wrong, I think that Bob showed a lot within the time period of 2016 and 2017. She was invited to be a part of many different movies and TV shows, such as Netflix's Cherry Pop that featured a couple other drag queens too, or her work in the theater production of Angels in America that paved the way for a lot more opportunities down the line. So yeah, at this point it was safe to say that she had a pretty successful run in the years right after her season. Yet despite that, I think that the brand that she would really create for herself wouldn't rise until much later in her Drag Race career. For example, Bob for sure had a big fan base that rallied around her during the airing of season 8, but as we know, out of the top 3, Kim Chi was the clear fan favorite by a landslide. So Bob's win, while entirely justified, did have a small moment of doubt with an audience that hadn't yet fully rallied behind Bob, at least in terms of majority. It's actually really disappointing that season 8 bared the brunt of only having 10 episodes in total, making it one of the shortest main seasons ever. I mean, even season 2 had more episodes than them. Not only that, but out of the 10 episodes, only 8 of them were true competitive episodes, with episode 9 being the music video challenge that never really has the same feel of competitiveness, even though it did result in Chi DeVayne being eliminated. Thus, the short season damaged the value of the entertainment, because it would have been a lot more fun to see who would have risen to the occasion had there been more opportunities with a normal amount of episodes. It could have potentially meant Naomi Smalls or Chi DeVayne catching up to Bob and Kim in terms of more wins within the challenges. As to why the season was so short, we never got an official reason for it. The fanbase just kind of came down to 2 main reasons. The first was the budget theory, since both season 8 and All Stars 2 were filmed the same year, so it caused there to be less episodes on season 8. But then there was the show wanting to keep the theme of 100 contestants by only casting 12 queens. Regardless of what the reason was, we missed out big time, because by the time we got to the top 5 of the season, it was like things had really only just started to get competitive, with Bob landing in the bottom for the first time, Kim Chi catching up to Bob by getting her second challenge win, and Naomi Smalls that had just gathered everyone's attention when she won the makeover challenge. I think that's why season 8 feels like a weird season compared to the other main seasons, because it was just such a shame that they went with having barely any episodes. Another little bit of lore that would go on to happen in the coming months is that Bob has a theory that she is the reason that Dragcon started doing the Queen's Walks, which is when they get all the winners from the franchise to walk the pink carpet so that they all get their little special moment. The reason Bob thinks she low-key pioneered this is because Bob said to the organizers of Dragcon that since this would be her first Dragcon as a crowned queen, she wanted to make an entrance that encapsulated that. that. So she asked the event organizers if it would be possible for her to come through a completely different entrance than everyone else. But they ended up getting back to Bob, telling her that they decided to include all the other winners who were attending in it too. So I guess it's safe to say that Bob was opening doors at Dragcon. Gia would be so proud. Something that I noticed throughout following Bob's career, along with what I learned about her past before Drag Race, was that Bob has always had a level of charisma that was present at any point in her life. For example, when Bob's mentioned her teenage years in high school, she said that she was president of drama clubs. So that eagerness to want to be the center of attention and showcase one's talent was already a big defining feature even for that era.
I found out I was funny in 10th grade in Miss Baker's theater class. There were two twins in my class, Dermika and Dernika Dawson. They used to laugh at everything I said. They thought I was so funny all the time. No matter what I said, they just cackle. And I thought they were funny because they kept laughing at me. They were like, "No, you're hilarious. You're actually really funny." And so I was like, "Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it."
It's no secret that Bob's early childhood years was very fruitful in terms of having a good supportive environment to grow up in. Yet there was a lot of challenges that she, along with the rest of her family, experienced growing up in poverty. It didn't help that Bob was the son of a single mother, whose name is Martha Caldwell, who was doing all she could to be able to provide everything for her children. If you're an active listener of the Sibling Rivalry podcast, then you know that every now and then, Bob will share some anecdotes about her life in her earlier years. I'll have some episodes linked in the description below that I recommend you listen to if you're interested. Anyways, Bob spent a good portion of her early years moving around between different areas, which included places like Mississippi, Clayton County, Georgia, subsequently staying within Atlanta from the 6th grade until she went to high school. Unfortunately, while Bob was always able to navigate herself at school, there was a lot of struggles that she experienced at home with her family. When Bob was young, her mother Martha worked at a company called Fold Pack, which was a company that made the packaging for a lot of Chinese restaurants. Bob's mom spent the majority of her time working at a factory, just making boxes all day, several days a week, by cutting them, packaging them, and sending them out to Chinese restaurants. But similar to her son, Martha Caldwell had a fire within her to continue fighting for a better life. It's during her time working at the Fold Pack company that she also decided to start attending college. I mean, just think about the level of pressure that she must have dealt with. You're a single mother, you have 2 kids at home, your only source of income is working at a factory, and now you decide to start attending college? Yet, it was worth the struggle, because after graduating college, she ended up finding a job as an accountant at Burnham Services. Then she went on to be an accountant for another accounting company called Wachovia that now allegedly goes by the name Fargo. Basically, if you haven't gotten the hint by now, Bob's mom had many different jobs throughout her life that fluctuated depending on the circumstances that she was going through. Like apparently, even at one point, she owned her own drag bar, but I wasn't able to find any confirmation on that. But still, given that Bob's mom is also a queer woman, it wouldn't surprise me. That being said, learning about some of the earlier lives of queens is always so interesting to me, because it wasn't until I started to organize all the information I knew about Bob's past that I really began to grasp the timeline of her life's trajectory, especially in those early years where all she really had was her mom and brother. I mean, if you wanted to know the degree to which Bob's family dealt with poverty, there was an eviction notice at her house like every 3rd month because Martha often couldn't afford to pay the rent. Add that to the fact that sometimes the electricity bills that hadn't been paid resulted in the lights being completely cut off in their house, so they wouldn't have power for a few days. During one of those incidents where they got their power cut off, eventually their mom was forced to head over to Georgia Power to try to find some type of resolution that could allow them to get their power back. All of a sudden, the next thing Bob knew was that the light bill was now under her name. Imagine it, being in 7th grade and already having your name attached to a light bill. Subsequently, by the time Bob went to college, she had bad credit as a consequence of the light bills once again not being paid off on time. On the other hand, Bob's father was once in the military but ended up having to be medically discharged. Unfortunately, it seems that Bob's dad barely offered support to his family, partaking in many illegal activities that landed him in jail a couple times. Bob's also referred to her father as a quote swindler because because of the amount of scams that he's tried to run on people to steal their money. Needless to say, he was barely in Bob's life at all, popping in and out every now and then, but always leaving Bob with a feeling of dread, because in some way or another, her dad would end up doing something super shady or disrespectful. By 2004, Bob was around 18 years old and was on her way to move out and head to college. Bob's grandmother ended up gifting her an '89 Nissan Sentra. While it was a very old car, even by 2004's standpoint, it did get the job done. Yet, as I mentioned before, Bob's dad was a shady person, and he ended up reaching out to Bob during the start of her college years, asking Bob if he could borrow her car. Bob ended up agreeing, allowing him to borrow it. Yet sadly, Bob's dad ended up scamming her and stealing the car, never to return it again. It was at that moment that Bob remembers feeling foolish for having trusted her dad or giving him so many countless opportunities to try to make things right in their relationship. After this incident, Bob's dad ended up ghosting him for a while, until occasionally reaching back to him in the years that followed. The last time I heard Bob mention her dad was with the story about how shortly after season 8 began airing and she was touring all around the world, her dad ended up calling Bob and said that he had heard that Bob was getting a lot of bookings thanks to the show, so he wanted to borrow some money, to which Bob rejected. Subsequently, it was also another moment of realization that her relationship with her father will always be something that is extremely hard to fix. Moving on, Bob's college years had even more drama to come. Allegedly, one of her college teachers ended up falsely accusing Bob of supposedly threatening to beat her up during an argument. The teacher went on to tell the faculty about it, subsequently removing Bob from the class, along with the restraining order that Bob couldn't go into the building that the teacher worked at anymore. As for the reason why the teacher falsely accused Bob, we've never gotten a full story of the event. But Bob's pointed out that the teacher's accusations came from racial prejudice. This was a significant event since it would end up having a domino effect as it forced Bob to drop yet another one of her classes, something that was a huge setback in her career as a student, especially since she was already struggling with keeping the proper amount of courses to qualify as a full-time student. Thus, Bob was forced to drop more courses, no longer making her qualify as a full-time student, which made her lose the financial grants that she was relying on to pay tuition, subsequently making Bob's only option to pay out of pocket and take out private loans. All of this chaos eventually led to a point where Bob came to the realization that she just wasn't going to be able to finish college, and she officially dropped out of it. Yet that wouldn't be the end of the road, because Bob would go on to leave Atlanta, making New York City her brand new home for the next 12 years of her life. It's here that she began to get into the drag scene, meeting many drag queens that she'd go on to be lifelong friends with, like Peppermint or Bianca Del Rio. Years into her drag journey, Bob ended up meeting a new queen on the scene, named none other than Monet Exchange. At the time that I watched season 10, I had no idea that Monet had such a close friendship with Bob the drag queen. I'm not sure why exactly that was. I mean, maybe since I'm not from New York City, I didn't even realize that they were both from the same city, but also because it was barely even talked about on season 10. If anything, we got a scene in the first episode where Bob calls out Miss Cracker as her drag daughter, but we didn't get a comment like that from Monet, at least in the final edit. This was probably due to the fact that even though Bob was there from the start of Monet's drag career, she isn't actually Monet's drag mother. Although Monet has given Bob a lot of credit for helping her become the drag queen that she is today, but her actual drag mother is really Honey Davenport. When I really think about it, it's evident that mastering the art of branding is probably why Bob has gotten to where she is now. I mean, the idea to capitalize her friendship with Monet, building on the fact that they had such a special chemistry together, tied them as one of the most iconic drag duos that we've gotten from the franchise. It's also no surprise that it was Bob's idea to start the podcast together with Monet, which began as season 10 was airing in early 2018. Although it's important to note that while the Sibling Rivalry podcast would go on to find a lot of success, in its early years, there was barely any episodes being put out, and the ones that did had a low budget production, since they hadn't built a proper following just yet. Like many other fans, I was drawn to this podcast because of the hilarious chemistry between the two. But it wasn't just that. The content that they put out often included discussions around topics that would end up being very educational to those that were listening. There's been a lot of social issues or pop culture commentary that has made me see some things in a different light. To add on to the aspect of Bob's personality of wanting to create a platform which he could raise awareness for certain issues, in the year 2020, she would start a podcast with Peppermint called Black Town Hall, which has more of a serious tone when discussing topics, but I suggest you check it out. As time went by, the way Bob carried herself within her platform was successful in showcasing many different aspects of her personality that I hadn't really noticed before. On the podcast, Bob has notoriously expressed that she does not believe in religion, despite coming from a very religious household, acknowledging the negative effects that religion has had on society. Mind you, it's actually pretty impressive just how level-headed Bob is when it comes to not turning to spirituality or religion to explain some of the things that have occurred in her life. For example, when Bob was a kid, she would sometimes experience sleep paralysis. One night, she woke up to see what she believed to be an angel. It looked like a pool of light that was hanging from the ceiling and slowly floated down into the room. At a closer look, it appeared to be a blonde white man. The angel then said to Bob, quote, "Do not go to Mississippi this summer or your grandma is gonna die." And then the angel left. That summer, Bob's mom drove them to Mississippi to stay with their grandmother, and coincidentally, her grandma ended up dying. But Bob didn't believe that it had anything to do with the angel that he had supposedly seen in her dreams. It was simply just a weird coincidence, which speaks to Bob's instincts to always rely on logic rather than being overcome with emotions. Cause tell me how you would have reacted if something like that happened to you. I would have been freaking out. But moving on, I firmly believe that a really key time period for the growth of Bob's career was the big shift that occurred throughout the course of the pandemic. It's in this era that HBO's We're Here started to air, eventually getting renewed for a total of 3 seasons with Bob, Shangela, and Eureka as the main host, paving the way for them to get several Emmy nominations, creating some really good critical acclaim behind the series. If you didn't know, We're Here centers around 3 queens going to visit really small rural towns in the United States that are usually very conservative and homophobic. It's there that each of the queens get paired with a person from the town, and they platform the stories of these individuals that climaxes in them doing a drag performance. Some episodes have happier endings than others, because as you might expect, it's not easy to change the mind of people that have animosity towards minority groups. But even aside from that, the level of production behind We're Here, when it came to the drag looks they were delivering, was impressive. Then again, HBO was the network behind it, so it made sense that they'd get a big budget. Along with working with designers to make her looks, Bob also hired Layla McQueen from season 8 to be her personal makeup artist. Layla built a lot of publicity for her makeup skills on Bob the Drag Queen, gaining a lot more respect from the fans. What's more was that Layla would end up winning an Emmy for her work on We're Here as Bob's makeup artist. Bob's friendship with Layla McQueen has been a very cute thing to follow over the years. She went from just being someone that Bob always had something nice to say about to working with Bob for several years in a row. Despite the success of We're Here, Bob's busy schedule, along with other circumstances regarding the production, resulted in them no longer returning for season 4, and instead being replaced by a brand new set of Drag Race girls. While the success of We're Here would last for the entirety of the pandemic years, what also saw a lot of attention was the Patreon that Bob had set up along with Monet for their podcast, which began to skyrocket in terms of the amount of fans that were now subscribed to be able to get bonus content from the duo. The sudden shift can best be explained by the fact that most of the world was now on lockdown, so there wasn't anything better to do. Yet that year, Bob hosted the Pit Stop for season 12 and All Stars 5, becoming an instant fan favorite of Pit Stop hosts. What made it even better was that Bob was taking the opportunity to brand the whole experience by having all of her season 12 Pit Stop episodes be correlated by her wearing houndstooth fabric on her outfits, and then All Stars 5 where she went with a pride themed layout. After hosting the Pit Stop, she would continue pumping out content for everyone by creating her own version of the Pit Stop called Purse First Impressions, a series where she gave us our first big realization that Bob and Thorgy were another great pairing with excellent chemistry. So then, by the time we were coming out of the pandemic in 2022, it was as if Bob was even more highly regarded as a queen within the franchise. It was clear that she had gained a lot of new loyal fans that were living for what she was uploading to the internet. Granted, she was always highly respected since before she even got on the show, yet I do feel that her career really did start to skyrocket during this era. But feel free to share your perspective on that below. One of the funnier stories between Bob and Monet was that Bob bought Monet a custom sweater for her birthday, but Monet refused to wear it despite Bob begging her many times on the podcast to put it on. Eventually, Monet wore it on an episode of All Star 7, but by that time Bob was over it. Speaking of which, it is forever a mystery why World of Wonder never reached out to Bob the Drag Queen to ask if she'd be interested in competing in the first All Winner season. I mean, some people think that they wanted to save Bob for the second All Winners as a means to not waste all the heavy hitters on one season, which like, that's fine and all, but so many fans, including myself, were so hyped up over the idea of one day seeing Monet and Bob compete together on the same season. So the fact that there was now a possibility and they didn't even bother to try to make it happen kinda sucks. While I was editing this video, Bob ended up doing an interview with Joseph Shepard, where she was asked a question about potentially returning again for an all-winner season, to which Bob said that it isn't at the top of her priority list anymore, and that she doesn't realistically see herself returning again to compete. It seemed that it wasn't so much that Bob doesn't want to return, but the level of time that needs to be invested to compete on Drag Race can sometimes take months, including preparing, filming, and of course then the whole promo process once the season airs. Bob's career has reached the point now where there's so much content she's creating across various platforms that taking a break could hinder her career's momentum. What's more is that she actually gave a response on whether she would take over as the host of RuPaul's Drag Race should Ru ever retire. And to the surprise of many, Bob sort of dismissed the idea of hosting because she doesn't think that she'd properly fill in the role due to the nature of her being brutally honest about the things that she sees. Yet, I beg to differ. Bob to me would do an excellent job taking over as host. But one thing that the audience would have to understand is that it wouldn't be the same type of energy that we had when RuPaul was a host, because that simply will never be able to be replaced. I think it would be easy to get used to the change in vibe that the show would give off with Bob as the host. Just because it would be different doesn't mean it would necessarily be bad. Plus, it would be sort of awkward to see Bob try to emulate Ru's mannerisms. Kind of like on Canada's Drag Race Season 1 when all the judges just seemed like they were trying to act like RuPaul, but all it was giving was Trixie's Snatch Game performance instead. On the other hand, there is other queens that have also been mentioned as potential hosts, like Bianca Del Rio or even Sasha Colby, but who knows what'll end up happening. As I've mentioned before, right now, Bob is currently on tour with Madonna. Bob's relationship with Madonna is probably one of the biggest flexes that has come out of her ever-growing career. I mean, the fact that she considers Madonna a good friend of hers and are actively on an international tour together is sort of crazy to think about. The first time we saw Bob acknowledge Madonna was during the season 8 runway, where she chose to dress up as Madonna's Girl Scout uniform. Apparently, even though season 8 aired years ago, Madonna had never even seen this runway, and after Bob showed her the look she did on that episode, Madonna's first question was, quote, "Why'd you choose that one?" A question that most viewers had as well. One of the main reasons why Bob was able to connect with Madonna was because Madonna's daughter is actually a really big fan of Bob the Drag Queen and had requested Bob to be invited to an event that they were having for her birthday party. Yet Bob had work obligations, so she had to reject Madonna's request multiple times to her management team, who were consistently reaching out. It got to a point where Madonna herself straight up spoke to Bob on the phone to get her to attend the party. The best part of Madonna's concert is that Bob acts as one of the main narrators, having a lot of the spotlight for most of the continuation of the show. When it was first announced that Bob was going on tour with Madonna, I was actually expecting Bob to be the opening act and perform her own music. Obviously, what ended up happening was even better, but it does bring me to my next topic that we need to explore, and that's the music catalog of Bob the Drag Queen. Right after the season 8 finale aired, Bob released a music video for her first official single titled Purse First, an excellent masculine moment in branding that would have many queens taking notes for future seasons. This song has probably been in my Spotify's top 100 for many years in a row, just for how energetic it is. The video includes cameos from Todrick Hall, Layla McQueen, Derek Barry, and many more. It was actually a pretty good song to introduce yourself in the music industry with. The next big moment she'd have would be in 2017, where she collaborated with Alaska, who had just won All Stars 2. I'm gonna be honest, Yet Another Dig is probably within my top 3 music videos from Rue Girls, just because of the amount of layers surrounding it. First was the title, Yet Another Dig, referring to the infamous beef between the West Hollywood queens and Trixie Mattel, where Detox infamously responded to something Trixie said with quote, "Yet another dig at the WeHo girls." Also in the video, Bob makes some references to the fanbase during this era, saying that All Stars 2 was rigged for Alaska to win.
I'm a redwood and you yet another twig. All Stars 2 was yet another rig. Yet another dig, yet another dig at me.
But it gets better. They officially released this song in October of 2017, just 4 months after the shocking season 9 finale where Shea Coulee lost the crown to Sasha Velour's Rose Petals. Alaska makes commentary on the fact that it was straight up an unfair turn of events, since Shea had 4 wins. So to her, Shea's placement is that of a winner and nothing less.
Season 9 girl Rue just got me. 4 challenge wins, 4 challenge wins, then the finale comes and then the crown queen is. It's not right, but it's not okay. Who's after peppermint, bitch? Not Shea Coulee.
What makes watching this video even funnier is that they had to go on location to film this in an actual desert in the middle of the summer. Mind you, they were in full drag, so you can imagine how uncomfortable they were. But they both ended up being professional divas and gave us a key piece of Drag Race lore of the decade. For some reason, Bob didn't focus too much on her musical career after this, probably out of wanting to focus on touring or creating other more substantial avenues that she could start making content for. In 2020, she did release a song called The Most Office with Peppermint, and while it was a super catchy song, it was more so made as marketing to get people to vote in the upcoming presidential election that was happening. Over the pandemic, Bob would end up working on creating her first official EP that she titled Gay Barz. Gay Barz is not the typical album that you would have come to expect from Bob when we compare it to what we saw with Purse First and Yet Another Dig. The EP came out in February of 2023, where she included the infamous picture of her getting arrested in 2010 as the official artwork for Gay Barz. There was a total of 6 tracks. Bitch Like Me would be the first single for the EP. The production quality for these songs are excellent. To me, what separates the entire Gay Barz EP from Bob's previous music releases was that this was very clearly a more personal project that gave commentary to aspects of her own life, as opposed to making something which lyrics could have pandered a lot more to the Drag Race demographic. Nevertheless, the promotional rollout for the EP involved several music videos, such as Gay Barz featuring Ocean Kelly, Camera Time, and Mikey Angelo, or the latest video for Booty that had some pretty interesting animations that had me kind of laughing the first time I saw it.
Full of magic and a couple booty wishers. Every time you walk in, it's a booty earthquake. Put that ass on trial and burn that booty at the stake.
Now, what's sort of a topic that sometimes gets touched on Drag Race is the whole concept of being sober. The amount of responsibilities that are present in Bob's life right now is probably already difficult to manage as is. But similar to RuPaul, what's been holding it all together has been her constant practice of sobriety. Back in the day, Bob apparently used to be super wild, which by the time she got to college, she ended up getting into drinking and had issues with alcohol for a while. Eventually, she did end up finding her way into a healthier life, especially thanks to resources like Alcoholics Anonymous groups, allowing her to learn to challenge her energy into trying to expand her brand into newer markets. It's thanks to that she was able to learn how to channel her energy by expanding her brand into newer markets. This past year, she, alongside Monet, created the Bomo Beauty makeup line, which ended up getting really good reviews by people that purchased it. I mean, they even have me wanting to buy one, and I don't even wear makeup. Along with that, Bob released several comedy specials on different networks, such as Suspiciously Large Woman, or as of recently, woke man in a dress that I'll link below should you want to check it out. So then, when it comes to Bob the drag queen, it's clear that there was something about her even from a young age that would remain a key part of her persona for all of her life, giving her the commitment to follow a path where she could excel in her skills as an entertainer. Her run on season 8 proved that she'd go on to do an excellent job at carrying the title of America's Next Drag Superstar. And now, more than 8 years after that historical moment, Bob is more successful than ever before. As of 2022, Bob shared that she had bought a house for her mom, something that she had been working towards doing ever since she first got the call to be on Drag Race. So now that she's literally seemingly achieved almost every single one of her dreams, it's about to get even more intriguing to see what's next in Bob's story. Thank you again to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Make sure to use code GREENGAY for 20% off your first order. Remember, not everyone likes seeing a jungle between your legs, so click the link in the description below. I want to take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Poppers Alberta, Sari Tish, and Natasha DeLeon. In the Green Squad, we have Azure, Cayman Rider Furry, Franny Fishsticks, Edgar Allan Pub, The Only Sean, IJS, Not a Punch But a Keek, Chet Barker, Jack Beck, and Aaron W. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter at GreenGayYT, and follow my brand new Instagram and TikTok at itsGreenGay. Also, make sure to like the video and comment below what you thought about this topic. I'll see you guys next time.